Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I have an opportunity today to work on an older reel. This one was found by Scott at a flea market in Southern California. It's a beauty. It's a Shimano Bantam. It's the Magumnlite 2000 GT. 2000 is not the year it was made. Just for those of you that may be wondering along the way, how do I know that? Well, when I get a reel in that I haven't worked on in a while, or maybe have never worked on, I go and I try to find a reel schematic for that before I start taking things apart, only to have them, kind of surprise me. So the reel schematic tells me that the reel was made in 1987 and not 2000, and it shows an exploded view of the reel. And one of the things that always amazes me when I see these is how little the insides of reels mechanically have changed in all that time. I mean, we're working on a reel now that's, 87, what is that, 37 years old. And the design internally, they've gone to an instant anti-reverse as opposed to a fingered anti-reverse dog. But besides that, little has changed other than what's known as the industrial design, which is the pretty parts on the outside. This is a mag reel. We're going to take this reel apart. We're going to show you how it was made, how to service it, and how to keep it fishing for a long time to come. But if you like those types of videos, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. Those of you that have subscribed, thank you very much. We're on our way to 30,000 subscribers, and who would have thought 5 years ago that that was even something to dream about? Thank you all for your support. And to those of you that haven't subscribed, I want to encourage you to do that because, it'll teach you about fishing reels, about fishing in general, about how to service reels, and maybe how to keep yours running, or if yours is broken, how to give it a second chance. We've removed the hold down screw, the support cap, and the nut, and now we're going to remove the C-clip that holds the gear shaft on, or the E-clip, and then there's a little washer underneath there that if you don't take that washer out, it tends to get stuck in that groove. So we'll bring that back. And now we can remove the handle. And I like to remove the star adjuster before I take the rest of the side plate off. Now, Scott did tell me he cleaned these up, which is great. Took care of removing the line and give it a good bath. But we're going to make sure that it's working mechanically as well. When I take my pieces and parts off, they go to a parts tray. And I use the parts tray that's from a fast food container as a way to organize my pieces and parts. I like to put the sub-assemblies in different corners. You don't have to do that. There's plenty of ways that you can organize your pieces and parts. This is one way. And I would encourage you to find the way that works for you. I just use the pliers because these thumb screws were particularly tight. And we're going to remove both of those so that we can remove the side plate. Now this one does have an anti-reverse override switch here. I like to keep it in the off position as I go to remove that. Now we can take our side plate off, remove our spool. And there's a bushing on the back of this one, and there's the magnets. You don't touch the magnets. You don't need to. The bushings you don't even have to oil. The only service that this spool is going to require is a little bit of grease onto the back tail that's going to ride inside that bushing. Please use fishing reel grease when you do this. I'm using Penn Precision reel grease. There's plenty of fine greases out there. If you want to be a Shimano purist, there is a Shimano reel grease as well. While I have this apart, before I'm doing too much more, I do want to service that pawl and line guide. The line guide is nice and clean. This whole reel is nice and clean inside. It certainly doesn't look like it's been fished heavy for 37 years. And to service the pawl, you want to remove this cover or cap. And then the pawl is underneath here. Now the pawl, this one has a little inner hole to it, so sometimes you can get it out simply by using a pick to do that. And when you remove the pawl, well, you may be able to see it here. I can see it. There's old grease that's kind of lined up on the shoulders here. You want to make sure that that's cleared off. And use the pick and then a paper towel to wipe that down. And the other thing you want to check is to make sure that the points are the same size and one is not bent. So for example, if your pawl looked like this with no tip on the one side, that would be causing your line guide to trap on the one side and not return. So that would mean that you would need to replace that pawl. All right, this is good. Line guide is clean. I'm going to put a drop of oil into this. And then because my fingers are big, I'm going to use a little micro pliers here to put the line guide pawl back into the carrier. And then turn it to make sure that it's turning. If it's not turning, just keep turning it until the line guide moves back and forth. That'll indicate that the teeth that we just showed you in that pawl are set properly in the groove on the line guide. As I mentioned, not much has changed in the design of low-profile bait casters. They've changed materials. They've gone to different types of metals for the gearing, and they've added some ball bearings. So like this reel has a bushing in the back there. They've added bearings. You could upgrade if you wanted to, if you could find the bearing size to replace it. I just did that on a Shimano Bantam Crestfire, which had bushings. I made them bearings. But you don't have to. And I found that, well, a reel like this was designed well right from the beginning. It's a nice performer, and it's going to continue to perform well for a very long time to come. Okay, the last thing I want to do after inserting that spool is to get a little bit of grease onto the other shaft, which is going to go into the gear side. I'm going to set that sub-assembly aside, and we can get over to dealing with the gear side of this assembly. I'm just looking to make sure. This one is one of these that just drives me nuts. I don't think it's this one. There's a two-piece assembly type of a thing on the side plate where it meets the bridge plate. In this case, I think we're all right. And I believe that we only need to remove the two screws here. I'll get it wrong. There is a bump guard. I think this might be the bump guard. Actually, I'm looking, these two are the screw holders if I flip that. So it looks like, no, I'll get it wrong anyway. One of these just holds a bump guard for the, I believe it's the anti-reverse. This one I know is one of the ones I need to remove. And the other one is trial and error, I guess. So what that's going to tell me is if I back I'm going to back this one off. If the side plate doesn't start to separate, it means it's the other one. And it's starting to separate. So that's the, I believe this is the only other one that needs to be removed. Both of these go into the piece, and now we should be able to pull that side plate off. This does have that two-piece. See this little thing here? That's always fun for me to work on. I don't know. I was wondering, and yes it is. All right, this one does have the bearing underneath. If you were removing this screw, that's that bump I was telling you about, that doesn't have to be removed. We have a bearing in there. You can test the bearing. This reel's very clean. It's has a nice find here. So we're just going to oil that bearing. I tested it with a screwdriver. And, well, remove this piece. This has two little inserts that are going to go there. We've removed the E-clip, so this whole assembly should come up. And what's going to prevent that whole assembly from coming up is the anti-reverse dog. Before I get too aggressive, I'm going to take the springs that are the yoke springs. See if I can't pull the yoke up too. Probably can't. I think it's got to come up in unison because the pinion gear typically is wider on the one side. And now we can continue walking the rest of this up. This has the old style anti-reverse dog that has got a fork on it. And so you don't want to pull up and out on it because you will separate those wings. So make sure that you're okay with that. Take pictures along the way. If for some reason you get stuck, the pictures are going to help you to spot what you took off, when you took it off, what the orientation of it was, and so on. This is your gear shaft. Just wipe it down. This is your anti-reverse click ratchet. That's also going to be the trip ratchet for your automatic trip. So you're going to push this down. Just looking to see if anything's going to fly off when I do this. You're going to push this down. That brings the lever in to here. It's going to get trapped in one of these little recesses on this gear. When you turn, it's going to push it back up. I'm going to hold the spring, push it back up and return it so that the yoke spring can engage the spool, or the yoke pinion gear can engage it. You'll have the yoke, and then you'll have these two springs that are putting the pressure to move that yoke back down. This, there are two offsets here. We can actually take that and put it on this side. Make sure that those offsets seat properly. That's going to seat like that. Don't know if we're going to be able to hold that as we go to reassemble. They're both the same size, so I think it doesn't matter which way it goes here. I'm going to take the anti-reverse dog as well. Going to seat that. It's got a fork, two tags on each side of it, and then it's going to seat on the metal ring there that we were just showing you. See if I can put this whole thing back together again after I clean it. You want to make sure that you get all the old greases and oils off. Now we can oil these slides here. If you put the grease on those slides, a lot of times what happens is the grease dries and prevents that slide from working well. And we have a burring on this side. Again, you can test it. You can use a driver or the like, and then oil that burring. Since it's been quite some time since that oil or that burring has worked off there. I think we're going to put the plastic piece back on the carrier without trying to juggle everything here. We're going to remove that pinion gear, which is totally dry, needs grease. So let's get the grease on there. Check the teeth. I did that already, but check the teeth. Make sure that they're all uniform, that they're not bent. And if there is any dried grease on it, well, take a pick or a pin or something and work all of that out. There's two sides on this yoke. This is offset, so it's kind of hard to mess it up. But there's a slanted side, you'll notice here. There's also a slot in the spool. The slot in the spool and the slanted side go together, and they face inward on this. And they nest just like that. Oops. Nesting it caused an oops. The pinion gear launched forward. That's okay. Just take a moment to reset. Now we can bring the other assembly over and down. And the big thing here is you've got to mesh that plastic gear and the holes. Okay, I've got that done now. Yep. So I just simply held the gear post square, took my pick and just rotated it until it came in, set in those two holes and can't be turned. All right, let's take a look at what we have for the drags. The drag on the back is a hard drag. Just trying to see if I can't Bring that up and out. You want to be careful with these. You don't want to shatter them. It's a hard drag, so just a little bit of oil probably. It almost feels like a piece of plastic. Inside that, it looks like it needs to be cleaned up a little bit. I'm going to take some 4/0 steel wool and run that around. I can't tell if that's old grease or if that's tarnish, but you want as smooth a surface as you can get with this. I think it's a combination of the two. It's probably that the old grease stained the internal. So get that clean so that it's nice and smooth. And we can put this drag washer back on. I imagine we have to do the same thing on the other side here. So let's do that. And I'm holding the drag washer in. Next up, we're going to inspect the teeth on the main gear. I am noticing that there's just a little bit of dried grease in one of these slots. So you can use a hard bristle brush like a toothbrush or one of these dollar store brushes to go ahead and pull that through. And I don't think you can mess this up in terms of which side is which side. So let's put some grease on this. You don't have to get it on every tooth. And you don't want to put too much on it because it's just going to clog the system. It'll be pressed out and pushed over. Since we have grease on our pinion gear, grease on the main gear, and the main gear is a different circumference or diameter to the pinion gear, you don't need to worry too much about it spreading. It'll spread quickly. There is some oil on this, so we're just going to go ahead and put that back on. That's in good condition. Next up is the cap washer or the top washer for this piece. It's a keyed washer. And then we have a beveled or bowed tension washer that faces up. Then we have a flat washer that goes next. And then there was actually one more washer to this, which came out with the star adjuster. You have the spacer, and then you have this little brass washer which goes on top. Okay, before we do the most difficult part for me, which is putting that case back on, you want to take the time to put those yoke springs back on. They fit in the cavity on each side of this. Just like that. Now we can wrestle with this. There's two posts. The thicker one goes here, the thinner one goes there. You want to try and get those in so that it is sitting flush like that. And the best way to do this one is to hold it off the table, because if you put it on the table, the studs on the back of these are going to pop it up. Let's take our case. Kind of shooting for a lot of different things here, but we want to see if we can't get... Oh, did that really happen? I guess I've learned from experience. We have a nice tight gap here, and that's seated the best that it could possibly be seated. Well, what do they say? Sometimes you just get lucky. I struggle with that little piece. It usually is off-centered or something. Like I struggle with these small screws. So while I put these two screws in to hold that plate on, I want to encourage you to ask questions, if you have them, about this reel or any reel. And, well, leave them in the comments section. It doesn't need to pertain to this reel. Maybe you've got one you're wondering about when it was made. Maybe you've got one that, well, it's just not performing properly. I'm just testing our anti-reverse override. That's working fine. So we can test to make sure that we have the free spool and retraction. We do. And that's ready to be reinstalled onto the main part of the reel. But before we do that, let's go ahead and buff this up a little bit. And back to the questions. I try to answer those in the morning. If you're stuck on a reel, I'll try to help you out as best I can. I always reserve the right to say I don't know because, well, a lot of these things I don't know. Like I didn't know I was going to get lucky here. There you go. All right. This, you want to hand thread this on. If it's not threading easy, stop and look at it. It may be cross stripping or cross threading, and you don't want to strip that out. Next up is the little handle tension washer, kind of shaped like a U. That prevents you from backing the star adjuster up and locking it onto the handle. That's while we have the handle off, let's put a little bit of cleaner on there. Shot of oil into each of the handles, knobs, so that they turn free. Put the handle back on. We're getting close. We have a small screw here, or a small washer rather, that goes over. Then we have the E-clip next. You can usually get these on by hand. And with that clip installed, let's go get the cap nut, put that on. Same idea here with the cap nut. It needs to go on free and easy by hand. If it's not turning free and easy, it's cross threading, and you don't want to do that. So let's go back here, tighten this up. And then you want to just make sure that you can get the cap back on. That's usually if this is perpendicular to the hole, or if you have a point of the star and you can align the hole, which is what we've just done here, to accept that set screw. One more screw here. Now we should be able to mount all of this to the side plate on the reel. Line up your holes. You got two things going on here. You want to turn your spool, make sure that you're set in here, and because the gear side is driving the line guide, you need to make sure that you do a little bit of a turn of the handle to make sure that that's meshed. Once you do that, you can tighten down our two thumb screws. Now that last turn was done with the pliers, so you can probably tighten it as much if you like. I think we'll, first finger strength. Tighten down on the drag washer, and well, all that's left is give it a test. So 1987 was when this reel was made. You'd think it was made yesterday. It's turning nice and free and easy. We have the free spool release. That by itself, it's got a bushing and a bearing on this. It's turning nice. If you wanted more free spool, just back off the bushing, the spool adjuster here. If you want less, tighten it down. Scott, you picked up a beautiful reel from the flea markets, and well, thank you. So one more thing before we leave on this one. Since it is driven from this side, when you go to cast in free spool mode, your line guide is not going to be moving. You'll see I'm turning the spool. The line guide is not moving. So to optimize the cast, make sure you center the line guide before you go to cast. If you leave it to one side, it's going to result in less distance because the line traveling from this side of the spool has got to go all the way over to that line guide and then come back to the centering line guide on your pole. If you put it in the center before you go to cast, it's minimum distance and it's coming straight out to the line guide on your pole. So if you have one of these where it does not move on casting, make sure to center that line guide. Well, that's it. A special thanks to our first responders, our police, fire, first aid, rescue, and all the public services that keep us safe. And to everyone, I want to enjoy the art of reel repair. I hope you've learned from this one. If you liked the video, please like it. And, well, if you have the opportunity to find one of these 37-year-old reels, I think you're going to enjoy fishing with it and, well, the treasure that it is. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.